Chapter 5 of The Voice of the Lion Was Heard in the Land. A Good Omens fanfiction, written by A.N.D. Read aloud by SkyAsimaru. If you enjoy this podfic, you can check out the original story on Archive of Our Own. If you would like to hear more of my recordings or see some of my own work, you can find me through the pen and screen name of SkyAsimaru. The Voice of the Lion Was Heard in the Land. Chapter 5 Cast into Darkness. Summary. As tried, he really did. But every day was a little harder, even though the pattern never changed. Notes. This is the chapter that earned the mentions of depression and depression tags, and is told from the depressed character's point of view. Reminder, this fic will earn the happy ending tag, too. As tried, he really did. He cared about Leo deeply. He took personal pride and responsibility for the many children who looked to Leo for guidance, advice, a friend. But every day was a little harder, even though the pattern never changed. Get up in a cold, lonely flat. Go to a job that was no longer a joy. Try not to punch the new actor in the face when Gabriel fawned on him, or when his character sounded like a particularly annoying televangelist. Don't talk to whatever journalists were still hanging around. Go home to a cold, lonely flat. Wonder what Tony was doing, and if he was all right. Start to write him a text, erase it, pretend to eat dinner. Try and fail to sleep in an achingly empty bed. Tony's disgrace had been a fast-moving scandal that quickly blew itself out in the absence of actual facts or actual accusations. The tabloids found something to be shocked about the royal family by the end of the fortnight, and never mentioned Tony again. But now he was still in the States, and not answering messages from anyone in the Leo cast. Gabriel and Michael were disgusting in their smugness. Letters and emails were pouring into the publicity department. Letters and emails which, as Tracy and Shadwell were daily reminded, were thanking them for the changes and saying how relieved they were Simon was gone.
"It's a pack of lies,"
Shadwell grumbled one day, keeping his voice low as if they were prisoners exchanging information.
"I've seen 'em. Every single one is demanding we bring back Simon and fire the toad."
He caught Tracy's eye.
"Almost every single one of them. Some of 'em are asking about Chandra."
Az and Tracy nodded. Chandra the cheetah had all but disappeared from Leo, despite her having been a solid third in fan favorites. Besides, they knew the truth from social media, which had united for the return of Simon, and even more unanimously against Haster's preachy, holier-than-thou, Tully the Toad. Tully lasted all of 6 episodes before he had to be hastily written out by a grim Gabriel. He'd been forced by a dedicated group of Simon fans who had been picketing the studio. Their phone cameras caught Haster smoking a cigarette outside, a bookie's form sticking out of his coat pocket, and the retaliatory, "Do you want this person modeling this horrible behavior to your innocent little kitties?" campaign went viral on social media within minutes. Privately, none of the actors thought that either a quick smoke or a little flutter was any more of a sin than attending a gay nightclub. But, as Tracy put it, sauce for the goose was sauce for the Gabriel. The hardest part for Az was checking his email. There was never anything from Tony, who had obviously decided to make a clean break. On the other hand, Leo scripts were pouring in, each one worse than the last. Finally, the day came when he checked his email, downloaded the latest script, read it, and snapped. Az hadn't even noticed how numb he had become until he felt the unfamiliar rush of white-hot rage. But Az, fussy, meticulous Az, had never been the creature of drama and impulse Tony was. What he did next would be carefully planned. He put the kettle on, thought about all his options, then picked up the phone. Not to Tony, whose silence was killing him more each day. Not to his agent, Sandy. Not to Tracy, his co-conspirator in attempting to keep the original heart of Leo beating. Az didn't often use the connections Leo had created for him in the acting community, but he had been punctilious about remembering birthdays, weddings, births, major career events, and various religious holidays with the appropriate cards and gifts. His quieter actions, a discreet gift of money here, a quick phone call to the right person there, had been the making or saving of several careers. Az usually did it because he took simple pleasure in doing good deeds, without need for reward. But he wasn't naive. He had a decade's backlog of favors and a solid spot in the address book of nearly everyone with influence. Time to leverage that. The phone at the other end rang once, twice, was picked up. Az tried to sound cheerful, even as his heart raged with nauseated fury.
Hello! Oh, it's good to hear from you too. How is everything? Your daughter is well? Oh, good, good. Look, I need to, can I come guest on your show? There's something I have to, today? Really? Yes, I can come today. Best done quickly. No, I haven't heard from Tony. Yes, thank you. I'm sure he's doing fine too. Thank you for asking. When should I arrive at the studio?
Afternoons with Agnes was Britain's most popular talk and advice show. So popular that most people thought it was the only thing she had ever done. Not quite. Agnes had also once played Mary the Meerkat on Leo years and years ago. She'd been a perfectly good meerkat, but she shone as a professional talk show host. There was something compelling about her. She just knew whatever people needed to hear and made sure they heard it. A lot of it came from being Anathema's mother. Or, more accurately, Anathema's skills came from her. They shared whatever gift it was to get the right people in the right place to do the right thing. Even if, upon occasion, the right thing was to flame out in public so badly that being seen for who you really were, or being forced to get the help you desperately needed, was the inevitable outcome. People talked for years about famous stars who'd been practically hustled straight from the Agnes set to rehab. Az sat in the green room, wondering if he was about to be one of the infamous flameouts, nervously smoothing down the legs of his trousers. The wardrobe person having threatened him if he touched his signature tartan Leo bow tie one more time. He was certain he was doing the right thing. Couldn't see any other options. Yet still, once he went public like this, there would be no going back. "Mr. Fell, you're up in 5, the wardrobe assistant said, giving his bow tie an eagle glance. Az followed to the wings, just in time to hear the end of Agnes's introduction. "You may not recognize the face of our next guest, but there's no mistaking that voice. Please give a warm welcome to special surprise guest Aziraphale, the man who has helped raise generations of children, the voice of Leo the Lion." The sprightly Leo theme tune played as he stepped out, making Az's smile freeze a bit. The audience was clapping, and he noticed as he sat down, a good half of them were mouthing the words. He knew Leo wasn't just for little kids, no matter what Gabriel insisted. Agnes gently sat him down, and, without any of the usual social chit-chat, told the audience, "Mr. Fell has come to tell us an important message." As Az took a deep, steadying breath, a voice rang out from the audience. "Are you going to tell us it's going back to the way it was? Leo's rubbish these days. I won't let my children watch after that nasty toad seriously suggested someone get a spanking just for accidentally dropping a plate. Everybody drops things now and then. You used to do whole episodes about how accidents are normal." The audience murmured approval.
"Ah, yes, well,"
Az floundered. He looked at Agnes, whose dark, knowing eyes calmed him enough to continue. She gave him a small nod of approval. He took another steadying breath.
"Yes, there have been some changes, and, like you, I have not approved of them. That is why this very morning I put in my letter of resignation."
This was not, strictly speaking, true. "I quit" is 5 letters, and he'd scrawled it in red highlighter across the page in the script where Chandra the cheetah gave up sports and brainy books, saying she realized she would be much happier raising boys than pretending to be one. "What will the people who make Leo do?" Agnes asked.
"Probably replace me and continue in their new direction."
The audience booed. What are you going to do?"
Well."
Az looked deep into the camera, dropping for the final time into that voice.
"I asked to come on the show today, so the original Leo could give one last message to his many friends."
Afternoons in England are mornings in America. Tony was still groggily contemplating his coffee when his co-star Eric Damon ran in, phone held out.
AJ, have you seen this? Isn't this your ex on TV, talking about that show you used to do?"
Oh, God, Az was still so beautiful. Losing a little too much weight, he went off his feed when he got anxious. Tony had to help him, make sure he ate. And that voice, that soothing, caring voice that had reassured thousands of children, not to mention Tony himself.
"I want you always to be kind, to always help each other, to be willing to say please and thank you, and if necessary, I'm sorry as often as necessary."
Az Az raised his chin in defiance, although his voice remained the child-friendly rumble known around the world.
To never, never, never be afraid to love who you love.
The camera panned over the silent audience. Many of the people were crying.
I have to leave you now, but I want you to remember this for the rest of your life. I am proud of you. I am proud of you for trying, even if you don't always get things right. I care about you because you are worth caring about, just as you are, and you will always be my very special friend, even when you are big and tall and all grown up.
People in the audience were openly sobbing now. Even Agnes was looking watery as Az stood up.
I will forever be grateful for your love and support. Thank you and goodbye.
And then he was gone. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!" Tony was chanting, not quite realizing he was saying anything at all. "Whew! That was a hell of a farewell speech," Eric said in awe. "Wow! What caused that, do you know? It's gone viral, man. You should see the hashtag Leo's Friends right now." It's complicated." Eric shrugged. "Whatever. Hey, this seems to be part of it. Can you tell me what's going on and who these people are?" The lighting was grainy, the sound muffled. Unlike the previous professionally filmed clip, this was obviously surreptitious mobile phone video, shot in what looked like a car park. Underneath it, the reblog count was rising fast. Az sighed as he walked away from, well, everything, probably including his entire career. He almost didn't get past tea adverts. He'd never get past Leo, no matter how much other work he'd put in. Leo had been worth it. At least it had been while Adam Young had been around. As soon as he unsilenced his phone, he saw his agent had left a voicemail.
"You asshole! I can't believe you did me dirty after all I've done for you. You know what? I quit, you fat fuck, just like you did. Don't bother crawling back to me. I'm done. I'm going to make sure no agent in this town will touch you."
It was like a punch to the gut. Az had known that Sandy would be angry, but not this angry. Az had been a money tree for Sandalphon Brothers. Once the Leo role was solid, all Sandy had to do was renegotiate salary now and then, and take a cut of the jobs offered by the Leo's Friends network, none of which he'd had to lift a finger to set up. Az stopped dead in sudden anxiety. If he wasn't Leo anymore, did he have any friends at all anymore? He'd been in and out of the office to drop off his resignation page without talking to anyone, leaving Tracy and Shadwell in the lurch with no warning. Right when Tracy needed all the support she could get over what they'd done to Chandra the cheetah, they'd be within their rights to simply walk away from him like Sandy had, like Tony had. How ironic. The man who just told the world he loved everyone was probably not loved or even liked by anyone anymore. Hey, Agnes had come up behind him unnoticed. "I know what you're thinking, and stop it. You did the right thing. Here, read it when you're ready." She pressed an envelope into his hand, squeezed his shoulder, and left. Az opened the envelope and pulled out a mass-produced sympathy card with a photo of a cocoon on the front. On the inside, over a field of butterfly wings, the printed message said, "The caterpillar thinks the world is ending. The butterfly knows the world is beginning. Your future will be bright and beautiful." Beneath it, Agnes had written, "Depression lies. Do not listen to it." He had no idea when she'd gotten the card. Az knew that he hadn't told her why he wanted to be on the show, and there had been no time between his announcement and her delivery to have sent an assistant out to buy one. That was Agnes for you. Going home and burrowing into a cocoon sounded like an excellent plan. So Az hustled out, looking forward to going to ground and hiding for a while. Gabriel and Michael were waiting in ambush in the car park.
"I'm going to end you!" Gabriel snarled at him. "I'm going to sue you for everything you're worth. You can't just claim to be Leo." "I am Leo. Was, anyway."
Michael was practically quivering with malice. "Your contract clearly states that you cannot use any form of the Leo and Friends properties without previous marketing approval and providing payment of royalties, including any audio properties strongly associated with the Leo licensing." It took a moment for Az to parse that.
"You're going to ban me from using my own voice? That voice belongs to us now, Chuckles."
"Oi, Gabe!" Az blinked. Leaning over to look around Gabriel and Michael, he saw a familiar, scornful face. "What is this Tracy sent me? What is this gender essentialist shit?" Pepper threw what looked suspiciously like a printout of the latest Leo script straight into Gabriel's face. Papers fluttered everywhere while he looked foolish. "I will not allow my characters to endorse sexism of any kind," she stormed.
"Nobody cares. They're not your characters," Gabriel snapped. "You should be home playing with your babies, not interfering with men's work."
Pepper sneered back. "And you should be in the studio trying to work on this travesty, but we both know you can't." She looked over her shoulder to Az. "Tracy and Shadwell walked out the moment they knew you'd left. Did you know that?" Gabriel pulled himself up to his full formidable height.
"We are going to recast and continue with our vision."
Another voice broke in, calm and firm.
"No, you're messing it all up. You weren't supposed to do that. I didn't want anything to change. Now I'm going to fix it."
Adam Young was standing there, flanked by Tyler and Wensleydale, who was holding a legal briefcase. Gabriel sneered at him.
"Your buyback option expired weeks ago. You don't have any say anymore."
Adam stayed calm, but it was the sort of calm you feel right before lightning strikes.
"You should have paid more attention to your contract. I sold the studio, but I retain copyright on my characters. You'll find I have plenty to say, and it starts with the words cease and desist."
Numb, exhausted, forgotten, Az walked away. He never noticed the crew hand filming everything on their phone. Once safely back in the flat, Az turned off his phone and threw himself into bed He'd sleep off the shock and deal with everything else later. When he woke up, it was dark, but his mind was clear. The full enormity of everything crashed in on him. He didn't have an agent. He didn't have Leo. He didn't have Tony. Az curled up and cried until he fell back asleep. Waking the next morning was painful with its fresh reminders of everything he had lost. Az turned on his phone, but there was nothing from Adam or Pepper asking him to come back in. There wasn't anything from Tony either. Without them, the sheer number of missed voicemails, texts, and calls exhausted him. He tried to look at the news, but the first time he saw the words "Leo and Friends permanently canceled," he just turned the phone back off. He tried to eat some breakfast, but stopped after a few bites. Nothing tasted good, and he didn't have an appetite anyway. He'd eat properly later, when he felt better. At some point, there was knocking on the door, but Az didn't want to deal with anyone. He turned off the lights, waited, and eventually the sound stopped, leaving him alone like he wanted to be. Alone. He was truly alone, now wasn't he? He didn't have Tony. He didn't have Leo. He didn't have any friends. He didn't have any friends anywhere in the world. Not now that he had single-handedly ruined Leo. Days passed in a blur. Az tried to sleep as much as possible. When he was asleep, he didn't have to think about what he'd done. When he was asleep, he felt fine. Sometimes when he was asleep, he was back in the studio, joking with the others, feeling Tony's hand warm on his thigh. Sometimes when he was asleep, he'd wake up to find Tony in the bed next to him, and Gabriel, Michael, and everything that had happened next was the nightmare. But then he'd wake up for real. Those were the worst times, when he would cry and cry and cry and not be able to get back into that beautiful dream of happiness. Awake, he had to remember that he didn't have Leo. He didn't have Tony. Everyone was mad at him. Occasionally, the sheer animal needs of his body forced him to eat something, no matter how little he wanted to. He'd had a lot of heat-and-eat meals in the beginning, but he'd just take a few bites and throw them away, uninterested. Who wanted food when he didn't have Tony? When he didn't have Leo? He didn't deserve food. Everyone hated him. He should just stay at home, in the dark, where he wouldn't disappoint anyone anymore, and the jarring, exhausting, overwhelming sounds and colors and demands of the world wouldn't make him feel worse. He was so tired, he couldn't cope. He'd sleep some more and deal with everything later, when he felt better. He'd never feel better. He didn't have Tony. He didn't have Leo. He didn't deserve to feel better. Sometimes it was light when he was awake. Sometimes it was dark. Sometimes people still made him jump by knocking on the door, and he had to hide away from their noise and the bother, and they were being so mean. Why couldn't they let him rest? Why did they do it when he wasn't anyone anymore? When he didn't matter anymore? Nothing mattered anymore. He didn't have Tony. He didn't have Leo. He'd deal with people later, when he felt better. Gabriel had folded quickly when faced with the twin threats of copyright infringement and defamation of Tony's character, which included potential court-mandated access to all of Michael's emails and photographs. He and Michael headed back to America in a week and a half, where they promptly announced a new cartoon, the religiously themed Lessons with Leaguer Lizard, with a full range of merchandising. Pepper had wanted to turn Leaguer and potentially Gabriel and Michael into roadkill. Adam talked her out of it. If we give in to anger now, we've betrayed everything Leo stood for. We can't let it end like that. We need to fix Leo, Pepper, and I need your help to do it. I need help from all of you. Adam, Pepper, Brian, and Wensleydale were gathered around the table at the house where Adam had grown up, poking somberly at the remains of the cake that had welcomed Arthur Young home on his triumphant final return from the hospital. Adam, I don't think we can. We've made a start, Wensleydale pointed out practically. We've cancelled all that tatty cheap tie-in junk. And the episodes they've made will never be seen again, Brian said. I've destroyed everything. Voice recordings, artwork, tape, everything. Adam stabbed his fork at his slice of cake moodily. I don't want to leave it there, and I know I can't ask all of you to come back and start over. He stabbed harder in frustration, creating a mound of crumbs. A low chuckle came from the doorway, making them all turn. Never thought I'd see the day you children didn't inhale a cake in seconds. Arthur was there, thinner, grayer, leaning on a cane and the doorway, smiling gently. Adam, you've been trying so hard to keep all the bad things away from me and your mother, and we appreciate it. But everybody loves Agnes's show. It's on all the TVs in the hospital, and the doctors' waiting rooms, and everywhere else. He sat at the table, cutting himself another slice of the cake. I don't know what happened to make Az quit, but I heard that speech over and over. It's beautiful. Why not animate it as your final tribute? Adam stared at his father for a moment, then nodded. Az really was Leo. He turned to the others. No script I write could have been more in character. I'll draw it, Peppa said decisively. I don't need a full animation studio for anything that short. I can do it myself. Fittingly, the childhood friends who had started Leo the Lion were the only ones to see him off. Newton was touring. Tony was still in America. Tracy and Shadwell had announced their respective retirements and their marriage a few days earlier and were off on a cottage hunting honeymoon. Az had been invited, but he hadn't answered his phone or his emails. Here goes, Adam said, finger hovering over a button on his laptop. We started this on the internet, and we'll end on the internet. He pressed upload. Goodbye, Leo. There was little left in the flat to eat, except stale boxes of Tony's favorite cereal. But Az didn't care. He didn't have Tony to be upset he'd eaten it. He didn't have Leo. He'd ruined everything. He'd thrown away the best things he ever had. He didn't deserve nice things. He should stay here, where he couldn't ruin anything anymore. He'd get groceries later, when he felt better. Az did not feel better. Nothing mattered. He didn't have Tony. He didn't have Leo. The last of the milk smelled off. For a moment, Az almost poured it on the cereal anyway. A flicker of competence made him pour it down the drain instead, his arms feeling like lead. He was so tired, too tired to cope. He just wanted some sleep. He just needed something to be easy. He just needed one thing, one single thing to go right. He just needed someone to talk to him, to help take the burden of dealing with himself off of him. But of course, there was no one. Nobody wanted him, and the pressure of anyone else's expectations made him want to scream. It didn't matter that there was nothing to put on the cereal. He wasn't hungry anyway. Az ate a few spoonfuls of dry cereal, then pushed the bowl away. He'd eat later, when he felt better. There was an annoying knocking sound that was keeping Az awake. Muffled voices, too. Rude. Let him sleep. He'd finally feel better if he just slept enough. He'd have the energy to take care of himself then. In a distant, muffled part of his mind, Az realized he couldn't remember when he'd last bathed or done the laundry. Not that it mattered. He was a terrible person. He'd made Tony leave. He made Sandy leave. He left Leo, and now Leo was gone, and everyone hated him. He deserved to wallow in his own filth. The knocking went on and on, so Az rolled over, putting Tony's pillow over his head. His stomach rumbled. When had the cereal run out? This morning? Sometime yesterday? He didn't feel hungry, despite the rumbling. Didn't matter anyway. He could live off his fat for months. Gabriel said so. Often. He'd order delivery or something. Later, when he felt better. To be continued in Chapter 6.
Thank you for reading. Please drop by the archive and let the author know what you thought of their work.